Welcome everyone to Political Paradigm. I'm Terry Ikumi. Today we'll take a look at a plethora of issues. We'll look at the state of the nation. We'll look at Lagos State. We'll look at national unity and reconciliation, and then we'll talk about the Labour Party. And my guest is a member of the Labour Party, as the 2023 governorship candidate of the Labour Party in the governorship election. I'm joined by Mr. Gbadebo Rhodes Vivo. Welcome to Political Paradigm, Mr. Vivo.
Happy to be here. How are you?
I'm very fine. I trust you are as well. You must be coming on the heels of the meeting you recently had, but that's for much later. I'd like us to talk about national unity and reconciliation, because some things I saw on social media, especially as we commemorate the 4th anniversary of the EndSARS protest. I saw some things on social media which raised reactions with regard to national unity and reconciliation. You also had posted some things. Now, let's begin with this. Now, a few days ago, Peter Obi posted something about a congratulatory message to General Yakubu Gowon, who had turned 90. And it was taken to heart by a lot of Nigerians, especially the beautiful people of the Southeast. It prompted him to delete the post and then issue an explanation. So I just want to get your reaction to that and what it means for Nigeria 55 years after the Civil War.
Well, looking at it, it goes to show how much work and how much more work needs to be done to actually create real healing in our country. There are people that say, I understand where His Excellency Peter Obi was coming from in terms of putting the idea of the country forward, healing, leading with love, forgiving and forget. To forgive and forget is the way of, creating healing and bringing this unity, which is something he has always preached. And then you see the other side of it, where people are talking about the hurt that they still feel that has been passed down by generations. And also, it doesn't help. There's a level of, sidelining of the Southeast, marginalization of the Southeast in relation to the politics of Nigeria. And there's that huge feeling of that feeling marginalized. And considering everything that happened after the Biafra War, what people had to deal with, building themselves back up, the country has not necessarily proactively done what it needs to do to resolve and bring that healing. So what His Excellency Peter Obi is trying to do is, the victims are now trying to stretch out an olive branch to say, you know what, we've forgiven and we've forgotten. But a lot of people clearly, from the way it was taken, don't feel that way. And that is left for the country and its leaders, visionary leaders, to be able to say, this is how we can pull this section of the country. And bring it into our unity, bring it into our union.
But that's very important. I like that you say that, and that the leadership of this country must take responsibility with this national reconciliation and all. I also recall that you had tweeted about Namibia and the Holocaust and drawing attention to the importance of the leaders of the country taking very, very important steps to address this. Now, but many would want to ask, what could pass as a national reconciliation? We're coming on the heels of the EndSARS protest and the hurt that had instilled in our memories. So what is national reconciliation? And this question is beyond the concerns around the Civil War and the reconciliation. But we'll look at other, ethnic grievances, political grievances.
First, for me, is a true understanding of our history, and that being passed through our education system, so that generations that are coming that did not experience any of these things have an objective perspective on the events that led to the war, what happened during the war, and the aftermath of the war. So we are talking from a mutual understanding and acceptance of the realities of the war. What led to it? right? What happened during it and what happened afterwards. Now, I think that in itself will create the groundwork for healing to happen, especially with generations that do not experience any of these things, because a lot of people are carrying on trauma and a negative feeling that has been passed down to them based on the realities that their parents or grandparents experienced. And then they're also matching it with the reality of our politics, the seeming marginalization of the Southeast, the seeming almost even occupation of the Southeast. And then a number of things that are happening in the Southeast that somehow come across as conspiracy, but then people will tell you it isn't quite that. Um, so we need a situation where in a multi-plural, multi-ethnic society like Nigeria, multi-religious even, everybody, every group must feel that sense of ownership. Every group must feel that sense of representation. Every group must feel that sense of we belong. And that goes a long way towards national reconciliation as well. Um, and the politics and politicians, there's a lot that has to be done. Also with our leadership. And then we also need to understand whether we are doing a rotational government as the way we see it in the EU or in Switzerland, where zoning is ingrained into the constitution so that every group, feels they belong. Every group is going to produce a president. Every group is going to, feel that they are part of this union. That will also go a long way to our constitution. Or is it a conversation about merit? Are we looking for our leaders based on who is the best? We don't care where he's from. But then to achieve that, the country must have done enough work to create Nigerians, right? At the moment, most Nigerians are tribal. And, this union was not a union that leaders and different kings came together and said, let's form one grand union like the Songhai Empire, or maybe there was a king that came and conquered everywhere and joined it. This was something that most Nigerians did not really even have a say in. So whether that these conversations must be had, right? So we start having people that are able to truly embrace this bigger identity in the country, not only when they're outside the country and they have to use a Nigerian passport and identify themselves as Nigerian.
Okay, thank
So
you
those
very
are
much.
some of the things that come to mind to
Good.
answer that question.
Okay, so one of the things you said was that a lot of the young people now did not experience a civil war, but they carry over this hurt based on what they've heard as well. And some people live through experiences now that the older generations say is similar to some of the marginalization that they experienced themselves during the Civil War. The EndSARS protest that was commemorated a few days ago, 20th of October, brought back memories for a number of persons. I'd like you to speak to sort of the progress or otherwise we've made, because that protest was majorly against brutalization by the police and harassment. So speak to the EndSARS protest, speak to the lessons that have been learned 4 years after. What have we made any progress or otherwise?
Well, to my mind, the EndSARS protest was a watershed moment for us as a country, where the youth of this country were able to come together regardless of tribe, regardless of religion, regardless of class or societal position, and make one demand and speak with one voice. And they created a means by which their leadership could not be compromised by saying that they don't have a leader, right? And also the responsibility by which they manage the situation, such as cleaning up after themselves, engaging security when they were targeted with machetes and thugs were sent to go and destabilize or cause harm or intimidate the protesters. So there is that. But at the same time, we must also recognize that there was a horrific, tragic silencing of these peaceful protesters that came out to, make their to stand on their rights as Nigerians and peacefully protest. So that was a major problem. Now, the 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 whole process afterward, which includes the lying by the government, saying that nobody was killed, meanwhile there are 100 and something bodies was later found, is something that has not led to a proper resolve. It's something that still carries that trauma on with a generation. And it's something that is taking out hope from the citizen in institutions, right? Because this happened and there is no proper institution that has held anybody accountable. Now, it might work for the political elites at this time because they seemingly got away with that kind of transgression. But on the long term, it's not in the interest of Nigerians simply because when a whole population loses faith in the institutions, whether it's a criminal justice institution, whether it's the courts, whether it's the police, whether it's even the army, institutions are supposed to protect the rights of the citizen and ensure actually that the leaders that he puts in position are also held to account. When people lose faith in those institutions, then they take matters into their own hands. And, people like talk about, especially in Lagos State. Lagos State likes to talk about the destruction that happened during EndSARS. But they always conveniently forget or leave out the amount of people that were killed and people that were shot and how that literally triggered that. These people were on the streets for so many days. They never went and burnt any buses. In fact, buses were bringing armed thugs to attack them. And they did not destroy the bus that even brought those armed thugs to attack them, right? And so you see this kind of gaslighting that happens where it's like they did not do anything and they conveniently start the conversation from these youth came and destroyed all of these things in Lagos.
Mr. Rosevival, if I may come in here, I think I would want us to really assess progress or otherwise.
Okay. So in terms of progress,
so one second. The reason I ask this is since after the EndSARS protest, we've had a new president, we've had new head of police, we've had new head of the army, the security agencies that were directly involved, almost all of them, you understand? So, since after then as well, we've also had protests. So I want you to assess whether we've made any progress, one, in the demands by the EndSARS protesters, and then in the attitude of the security agencies towards the people.
From my observation, it seems there is a seeming reduction in the amount of harassment that young people are facing. There is a seeming reduction in it. And I think that the EndSARS protest started because it had been normalized, right? The amount of intimidation and taking and appropriating things from them and, intimidating young people in Lagos, in Nigeria. I've seen reports where people are still complaining about similar actions, but I feel that it has greatly been reduced. The reports that we see, the people that we talk to, they're not complaining about it as much as they used to. So there is that. So if you want to say there's progress in that regard, I believe that from the information I have, I might not have all the information, but information I have is there's seemingly a reduction in that. But then the part that is not palatable to me is that at every slight situation where people might be calling for a protest, the way the police and the security agencies mobilize almost to intimidate and snuff it out is unacceptable. Yesterday, I know people that are part of our party that were held in a Black Maria just because they were standing and they were protesting in remembrance of what happened on October 20th, right? And that's not acceptable. They have a right for peaceful protest, to peacefully protest and to gather. And so that's not acceptable. And yeah, so in relation to progress, I think that's what I have to say.
Okay, great. Let's talk about your Lagos state now, your beloved Lagos state. But I'd like us to begin on a general scale with regard to developmental priorities of the state government. I'm going to ask you if you think that the Lagos state government has its priorities straight.
I feel that there is a lot of lip service and surface. I call it tokenism, yeah, where few major projects are done um, to have a seeming impression that there's work going on, but you find that the impact that it's supposed to have on the citizens is not really felt because it's not based on a holistic plan that is people centric and putting people first. And let me explain. You see, if a government is constantly focused on how they can appropriate resources to themselves, and projects are based on that, it'll be the outcome will be very different. And you look at the impact that Chief Alaji Jakonde was able to achieve in 4.5 years, and the impact it had on the everyday person. So we're talking about healthcare, we're talking about education, we're talking about road networks and connections, the inner roads that are supposed to be responsibility of the local government, right? That are all being washed away. Erosions are happening significantly all over Lagos. But then you now put that to the side and then you say the government is doing work because now the blue line is working. Now the conversation is how many stops are on that blue line? How much do citizens have to pay? How much do these projects, whether it's the bridges that they did to allow for the red line to be able to move or interchanges that have been done, what is the benchmark of pricing these contracts, these projects, and how much more could Lagos have gotten if the way it is run is more transparent as opposed to the opaque system by which it is run? And these are the conversations because our population size requires a significant amount of infrastructure, right? And we have a huge population, but there's also a huge amount of poverty. You have a situation where the red line is commissioned and people have to spend almost 3,000 a day, right, to go back and forth on the train. And when you multiply that by, let's say people are working 5 days a week, so that's 20 days, they're looking at almost 60,000. Meanwhile, the minimum wage is 85,000, according to Babajide Sanwo-Olu. And people still have to pay accommodation, people still have to be able to move from the train stations wherever they're going, and people have to feed. And Lagos State is one of the most expensive places to buy food in Nigeria. It's one of the most expensive places to rent accommodation in Nigeria. So the lives of people in Lagos, the government's agenda and development is not really, it's not elevating that. And then when you contrast that against the way the government is spending money, you hear scandals like 2 billion naira being spent on fans, trips, private trips. I mean, I've put a lot of this information out over the past couple of months, and it just shows, just similar to at the federal level, that a government expects its people to, just persevere through so much hardship. Meanwhile, they are constantly being pampered with the commonwealth of the country, with the commonwealth of the state. And that's not acceptable. Right. So my perspective is that the resources that Lagos State has, resources Lagos State generates, especially for the fact that it generates these monies from taxes, and taxes mainly from pay as you earn, hardworking Lagosians, um, they deserve so much more.
Not the
That's my perspective.
not the 85,000 naira that the governor has proposed, especially because he's been commended by quite a number of people who say that it's above the 70,000 naira approved minimum wage. But you don't agree, do you?
No, I don't. River State has also approved 85%, right? River State has approved 85%, 85,000 naira, right? And you have a situation where Lagos State, you cannot compare Lagos State to other states in this country, right? You have a situation where Lagos State, the capacity for Lagos State earning is so much higher. According to even Babajide Sanwo-Olu, 70% of our energy needs in this country is absorbed in Lagos State. Huge percentage of foreign trade, foreign interaction, investments, most company headquarters, most places where administration happens. Oil is being drilled in the southeast, but the administration of it is being done in Lagos State. All those people are paying to Lagos State. So the amount, and this is not something that just started happening. Lagos State was an independent colony and then was merged with Nigeria. Then it then had returnees that came back with a lot of resources and developed it. Then we also then had it as a capital of the country. And now the commercial capital of this country. So it's very fallacious to compare Lagos State to any other state in this country. Especially for the fact that so much of the money that it generates is from the citizen. It's not oil, it's not farming exports, it's not minerals, it is hardworking citizens, right? So I feel that, and also we have to consider the high cost of living in Lagos State. We do. If somebody is earning 70,000 in Aingba in Kogi State, his cost of living is very different from the cost of living in Lagos State, right? So these are factors that we must consider, and also understand that our Commonwealth can be better applied.
You know, while you talk about the standard of living, some argue that the Lagos State government has done quite well in certain areas. It's called commercial capital of the country for a reason, and some commend the infrastructure there. Now, I know that about just under 2 years ago, they had a housing deficit of about 3 million. I think in June this year, we heard that it had gone to 2.4 million according to the state government. And that was because of some of the social housing programs of the government. I did a quick search and some of these housing programs popped up. Most recently, the Gondo 270 homes project. There was a collaboration with the FHA to improve housing as well. And then the new islands that the government believes will cut the cost of government. So perhaps you could lend your thoughts, since you're on ground, to some of these housing programs from a better informed perspective.
Okay, so let's start from the island, these islands that they want to do that would ease our housing deficit. You see, the moment you start to have an island, it implies that you have to stand fill. The moment you have to stand fill, it also implies you have to pile. At this point, you have increased the cost of your construction or your project significantly before anything can be seen above the ground. So automatically, majority of those projects will not be affordable to the average person that lives in Lagos. So that is not an affordable housing scheme. It's something like Eco-Atlantic is done for the rich, the ultra-rich, or people that want to use properties as investments. You then look at the housing that you've spoken about. The question is, how are these buildings allocated? At what price? How are they targeted at people that are struggling and can barely afford to pay? I mean, if you're paying a minimum wage of 85,000, you're barely touching I think you're under about, you're under 3 million a year. Correct me if I'm wrong. You're under 3 million a year. Now, how would that person be able to afford this affordable housing that you talked about? Because I've looked at the numbers, and you find that most of these things don't go to the majority of people that are in need. There are all sorts of rackets by which they are located. You see there's a lot of selling amongst themselves. But let's even put that aside. We saw lately that people were paying 250,000 naira a year to live under the bridge. They had renovated and created apartments under the bridge, paying 250,000 a year. Now, these are majority of Lagosians, right? They are huge. That's why you have so much informal settlements. You have people that are living in shanties and all of that. And you find some of these people working banks, right? So there needs to be a real attempt at solving this affordable housing crisis. And doing that is not by creating islands that make your cost already extremely high before you built anything on the ground. You look at the way Alhaji Lateef Jakonde achieved Jakonde housing and how it was so effective in reducing the rate of people being able to solve that problem of affordable housing. And then you look at places that need to be opened up, places that are on good ground that will not cost as much to just lay a foundation. Places like Ikorodu, places like Lagos East, the foreshore of Lagos East, right? And then you have also places in Lagos West. And I say, if we have a deliberate attempt to decentralize Lagos, do a lot of affordable housing, incentivize companies to set up in those axes, and then link that to the people that are working there are getting access to this housing, right? Then you start to go much further in solving this problem. It's like someone saying that Eco Atlantic is a solution to, our housing situation. No, it can't be. Yes, you might say it might create jobs. That's fine. Yes, you can say that saved our shoreline. Okay, all those things are credit worthy. But at the same time, you cannot talk about creating islands. There's so much part of Lagos that has not been developed, that has not been opened up on Lagos East and Lagos West. And that's what we need to do to
Okay.
decentralize. It's not further sand filling in Lagos Central that's going to create even more congestion and just be properties for the rich.
Let's talk about transportation now. Lagos State is considered to have one of perhaps the most developed transportation system in the country, having invested heavily in that sector. You've also talked about the blue line and the red line. And at the end of the day, what matters is its impact on the people, even as the cost of living climbs. And the government addresses the issue of minimum wage, adding about 15,000 naira to it. I think if the bulk of the money is spent on transportation, it will not have as much impact as you have put it. But most importantly, assess the impact of the good transportation network in Lagos State on the people.
I think that it's very mediocre. And I say this because it's not just enough to look and say we have this project. Question is, how long did it take to achieve this project? How much money was dedicated to it? What is the efficiency of that money that was spent on this project? So if somewhere in Kenya, I can do this, your same project for 100 million that you say costs you 1 billion, I cannot celebrate the project. I did not get good value. It took too long. Those are some things, because you see, you cannot have generational celebration of projects, especially when it's possible. And we've seen it done in Africa, where these things can be done in 4 years, can be done in 5 years, right? And for a significantly lower price. Now, there's that. Then also, Lagos State is a collection of islands. And our waterways, our water transportation system is something that really has to be, it cannot just be lip service or something to hold a conference about and to make the headline. It has to be something that is purposefully and done in a visionary way that normalizes water transportation, right? That it should become normalized. And that is by having holistic developments, whether it's attaching markets and supermarkets to jetties, whether it is the quality of jetties that are being built. I mean, I know people that would go from the island to places like Ikorodu, and the jetty looks like a safety hazard waiting to happen, right? And then also the policing of our waterways, where people are in boats without life jackets. So all of this is about safety and the idea of safety, right? Because you look at places like Venice, you look at places like Amsterdam that have similar situations with sea levels, and water transportation is a major way people get around, right? Water taxis and all of that. Now, so I feel water transportation is a lot more efficient, a lot more should be a lot more affordable for people to move around Lagos, and should have the impact of decongesting our
Okay.
roads.
Okay.
Then our transportation system in terms of train services. Currently now, the red line, they're charging about 1,500 last I checked, for people to move around. Now, and that is significantly more expensive than the buses, more expensive than the downfalls, right? So if we are trying to reduce the number of downfalls on the road, but we expect people to pay more, especially at such a time with our economy, it doesn't make sense. So if the government looks and says, okay, this project must have a payback period of this many years, the government should also be able to see and say, you know what, our policies have created untold hardship on people of Nigeria. So we have to extend and rethink this payback period so that one, you subsidize significantly so people get used to it. People start using it, it becomes normalized. And then over a period of time, gradually increase it to get to your target. It cannot just be this market fundamentalism that this government has come in with, where it's just what the World Bank says and how it should be, and this is the price, and this is the payback period, and everybody just has to deal with it. That leads to untold hardship, right? And that's what Nigerians are currently dealing with.
So we would dovetail into that, but I just want to quickly get your thoughts on the flooding situation in Lagos State. I know you condemned the demolition of houses on the canals, but the state government insists that that's the way to go, and it's continued the demolition. But the question is, has that affected positively the flooding situation in the state?
I mean, you tell me.
I don't
You guys
stay.
are
I
in the
don't
news.
stay in
You're seeing
Lagos.
the level of flooding that's still going on with all the demolition that's happening, right? My main issue with that whole thing was we had a government that took so much pride and joy in making people homeless at such a hard time in our country. And the same government was not clearing the canalways that already exist. You have canals that are overgrown with weeds. There is no regular maintenance. These canals are overgrown. Water cannot flow through them. Several all over Lagos State. Now, the energy with which they used to destroy buildings, if they applied that energy to clearing our canalways, to channeling the canals that are there, our problems will be greatly reduced. Greatly reduced. Now, the other conversation is, okay, people are building things. Where are they getting permission from? There is no, I'm in the construction industry. I'm in construction industry. And I know for a fact that there's no way you can build something in Lagos State that an agent or government is not going to come to that site. Whether it's for health and safety reasons, whether it's to check your planning permits, whether it's the local government, they will come. So directly and indirectly, they're either responsible or irresponsible for the building that's come up. Once it has left that foundation level to the point where it has been decked, to the point where it has gotten a roof, they are responsible.
Okay.
Right? So they also play a part in that. And the way it should be solved should not be one where it's just total demolition, total destruction without empathy. And that was the message I was trying to push out there. And also, before a government starts behaving like that, we should not be seeing canals and drainages that are not cleared. It means you have not even done the bare minimum that you should do, which also implies that there is something else behind this brash, this desire to just demolish.
Mr. Revival, let's talk about the state of the nation now at large. You're quoted to have said that the federal government lacks the direction and policies to lead this nation, to lift Nigerians out of hardship. But these government reforms and policies have been lauded by the World Bank. In fact, recently the World Bank has said that if these policies are sustained or reforms are sustained for 15 years, that we will reap the benefits. I must also add that there are those who have condemned what the World Bank has said and said that no country should be implementing this amount of reforms all at once. What are your thoughts?
You see, my knowledge of history and looking at developing countries and the history of developing countries in South America, in Africa, and in Asia, shows that there is no country that has achieved greatness or success by following what the World Bank says. The World Bank got us into, I think, the structural adjustment program at the time, and I don't see we lost a lot of the momentum that we had at independence based on that. And you also find a situation where the World Bank and these their policies, the countries, Europe and all of them, they don't follow those policies. They don't do it. And you see that it's not what we lack is visionary leadership. What we lack is a leadership that's willing to sacrifice for the long-term betterment of its people. It's constantly looking for the people to squeeze the people, right? As opposed to cutting the cost of governance. What has the World Bank said about cutting the cost of governance? What are the steps that this current president has put in place in terms of the cost of governance based on a World Bank saying that we should implement things and the people should suffer for the next 15 years? What have they done? What does the World Bank's position on how much money is constantly being borrowed to pay significant monies for the salaries and the allowances and the perks of being political elites in this country? What the World Bank said about that? And then also you look at security, you look at just the looting, you look at the level of our minerals that are being looted. You find a situation where a lot of government is involved in that at different levels. So think about how much can be generated and can come to the country's coffers if that was done legally, if those taxes were done legally, even if you're just formalizing the informal artisanal miners, right? And allowing for them to be able to export. And that also goes to bunkering of oil as well. There's so much looting, there's so much leakages in this country. Nigeria is not poor. Nigeria has just been badly managed and looted, right? And the problem is these same people that believe that they should go with World Bank dictates are constantly borrowing money from the World Bank without accountability, right? Without any real vision for how it can be put into the system to lift so many people more out of poverty that can then become productive citizens, so we no longer have to be borrowing money from the World Bank. But what I see is just the same of the same, right? And that is what it is. I feel that nobody is going to come, and I say this, nobody, to the African, to anybody any indigenous population that has been colonized, nobody is going to come and save us.
Let me quickly come in here. When you talked about the World Bank's position on these things, one of the things you asked us what the World Bank's position is on cutting the cost of governance. And I know the World Bank had released about 4 items that the federal government should work on, but there's one of it I want to pick up on so that you could speak to, because it's been really condemned by a number of persons because of lack of data in the country, and this is sustaining cash transfers. The World Bank had also said that the government should accelerate its savings from fuel subsidy removal to sustainably expand cash transfers and other well-targeted support. What do you think about this?
So there is a windfall to the government in relation to removing subsidy. Now, if that money is put into improving human capacity development, create productive citizens, then in 15 years, you will actually start to see a huge amount of people that are lifted out of poverty. Quality of our education system, quality of our productivity, quality of the skill set that Nigerians have to be able to produce and to be able to come on the global market as a place where you can come to produce things, right? Into our ability to have food sovereignty, into our ability to be able to produce petrol, right? And refine the raw products that God has blessed us with. So I feel that if that is done transparently and accountably, Nigeria will move forward. But the problem with this country is it's not about what is on paper. It's about the people that are going to administer these things on paper. You have a situation where you had a minister that's in charge of lifting Nigerians out of multidimensional poverty that they find themselves in. And is now linked to some kind of scandal, financial scandal of stealing money or appropriating money or transferring money to personal accounts, all sorts, right? So it's not about policies. It's about the quality of people that are in leadership.
Let me ask you to react to the news making the rounds that the president wants to rejig his cabinet. Some say it's quite early, it's unprecedented, and it would send a good signal across to public officials on the need to perform optimally or get booted out. What do you say?
Well, yes, I think that given the state of the reality that Nigerians are dealing with right now, ministers that have not shown themselves to add value or to improve the lot of Nigerians should, yes, they can be excused. And you do your best to then bring people that are technically sound and can show a vision that will lift Nigeria forward and obviously ultimately make the work of the president a lot easier. So I think that is a step in the right direction. But the conversation has to really be about understanding the unprecedented hardship that Nigerians are facing and understanding that you cannot appoint people just to protect or to ensure your political relevance in next election. You must find a way to play your politics without necessarily using the engine that's supposed to work for the people of Nigeria, right? And try and get the best people. We have Nigerians all over the world that are doing amazing things. And then secondly, it will be an improvement to see a government that is very that shows, that reflects Nigeria. Let me put it like that. You know, I think it was the former president, Buhari, that, you know, showed when you looked at the government, you looked at the people that were in charge, it was a northern government. And what we're seeing with President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is a very southwest government. And that might not necessarily be in the interest of Nigerians, right? I feel that we need to find the best people to be at the helm of affairs, but inclusivity also helps effectivity. Not effectivity. Inclusivity helps allow for policies to be effective, right? The more people that you have, and not people, and also another thing is, you find that a lot of people that are in positions either have or had an EFCC case, or, I mean, for instance, we had a situation with a House of Assembly lady that was seen to have repackaged COVID palliatives, and now she's been positioned as secretary for, I think, the Social Investment Fund or something like that. These are not things that give a positive signal to Nigerians to have faith or hope in the country. And that is really important. Faith and hope in the country is why people would invest in the country, is why people would take the chance to do another business, to start another business, to rent an office, right? Is why people would not japa, right? So you must give that signal so that people have a hope in the country, because ultimately that then reflects on the quality of your currency, the strength of your currency, which is also a reflection of the hope that people have in that nation moving forward. And all these things matter, and the president has an opportunity to correct some of these things. But let's see.
Okay, let's do some politics now. Let's talk about your party. This is from, there's a headline I want you to react to. It's from the meeting you had over the weekend, which talked about uniting in Lagos, uniting the party basically as you set your sights on 2027 elections amid the internal challenges. What was the fallout of that meeting, and at whose behest was it convened?
So it's just an extended stakeholder meeting. You know, we had House of Rep members that were there, and members of the party, right? And I think the main thing was, and I found from my experience that majority of political parties spend good years just fighting themselves, infighting for position, as opposed to getting consolidating themselves and then reaching out to people, doing programs that can impact their lives, talking to them, raising their awareness for the next election. You don't see that happening. And so for us, it was an ideal situation to bring people together, to start networking, start consolidating, and coming together to understand that we are all members of this party. We need to be united. A house divided against itself will not stand, and we need to do better. So it is not a meeting that was against anybody, right?
So
It
who
was a
called?
meeting that was bringing people together.
So who called for the meeting? Because I noticed that a number of your leaders were missing.
Yes, I mean the people that called for the meeting were the House of Rep candidates, Honorable Show Me that represents Ojo constituency was the main person that organized the meeting, and a number of other people called. We had the head of the obedient movement there, and a number of other people,
What,
candidates that were able to make it. They were there.
was this a Lagos chapter of the Labour Party, or was it a national meeting?
It was a Lagos meeting. It was a Lagos meeting,
Okay, great. So one of the things you
not
talked
a
about,
national.
oh great. One of the things you talked about with regard to the concerns within your party is you don't want a divided house. As it is now, there's some division within your party. And I don't know what you make of it, but would you talk to us about the status of the leadership crisis in your party?
So there was a judgment recently, and leaders of our party have said they're going to appeal that judgment. And I'm hoping that, you know, this process will be over quickly so everybody can know where they stand and everybody can, you know, start to move forward. Um, there are always disagreements in politics. There's always disagreements in politics. The important thing is that we can resolve and the house can still stand. The worst thing is to go win in court and then you come back and there's no house. You won, but it's a fair victory because you don't have the house together. And that is also one of the reasons why we called that meeting is start bringing people together, right? It's about leadership, it's about commitment to a party, and it's also about not betraying the hope that Nigerians have put in the Labour Party. We must show ourselves to be serious. We must show ourselves to be taking steps to win their trust, to win their love, and prepare for 2027. And
Beautiful.
for me, ultimately, that is what is going to come down to. Yes, there are issues that different groups have that needs to be resolved, and they are doing it the civilized way of going to court and leaving it for judiciary to be able to point us in the right direction. And I'm sure that there are also political backdoor meetings that are happening to try and resolve this matter as well. So we are hoping for the best in that regard.
You,
But
you,
we are not going to wait
you are
for just that to
very,
happen. We as the party must start getting consolidated.
you're a very high-ranking stakeholder in the Labour Party. I'd like to think you know that as well. And you've mentioned some courts, you mentioned a particular court judgment which INEC has obeyed now to recognize the Julius Abure-led faction. Is that the faction that you recognize as well?
At the moment, Joseph Abure is the chairman of the party, right? He's the chairman of the party as recognized by INEC. If INEC says that this is the chairman of the party, that's the chairman of the party. Now, there might be issues that stakeholders have about a Congress or the emergence of it or any of that, just the way INEC might have had issues with not recognizing him. He went to court and that has been resolved. Now, people within the party feel that, you know, there's still steps to be taken. Maybe they were not part of the judge case. As they move forward, they've joined themselves to the case, they've appealed. So we're asking the public to bear with us. We're getting our house in order. And whatever is the outcome of that situation, everybody will fall in line and, do the needful.
Yeah, I really wanted to know whether you were part of those. You are part of those who've gone to court appealing the judgment that reinstated Julius Abure, or you believe that Abure is legally occupying the position.
I'm not in court with anybody. I'm a Labour Party member that wants the structure of our party to be solid and consolidated to be able to win an election.
Okay.
That is my focus. That's my passion.
Okay,
we
so
cannot continue raising the hopes of Nigerians and not have the finishing to be able to deliver victory. So we need to get to work, and that's what I'm focused on.
That's a beautiful point you've made. And as we anchor now, let me ask you this final question with regard to those who say the buzz around the Labour Party is dying, and concerns around in sponsorship or infiltration by all the political parties, some say the APC specifically. And then draw your attention to the off-season elections that have held since the 2023 general elections and the local government council elections, and perhaps assess the performance of the Labour Party before the elections and now.
That's a very, very interesting question. I think that a lot of Nigerians sort of lost hope with the way INEC promised the elections were conducted and the reality of how the elections were conducted versus what they might feel happened with judiciary as opposed to the reality of what happened on ground. So there's all that has to be unpacked by the people, by the citizens. Local government elections, typically in Nigeria, the ruling party that controls the election agency that is used on that day generally tends to win the day, right? You saw what happened in Rivers, you saw, all over Nigeria. It's not you saw what happened in Abia, right?
Okay.
Generally tends to be how it happens. And it's unfortunate,
okay,
right? And unfortunate for several reasons, because local government is the one that's closest to people. And if you have a local government chairman that is visionary, that, is passionate about delivering good governance, that's the government, and that's the governance you will feel closest to you.
Mr. Roosevelt, I'm sorry I have to come in here. We're virtually out of time, but I just want to ask you one quick question, and hopefully you can answer quickly. Are you optimistic about the Labour Party reuniting and forging a strong front ahead of the 2027 elections?
Most certainly.
Beautiful.
Most certainly. We have no choice.
Okay.
And it's really for the entire opposition in Nigeria. We all have to come together to face the APC for us to even stand a chance.
Very good
as
point.
far as I'm concerned.
Mr. Gbadebo Rhodes Vival, it's always a pleasure speaking with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And that's all the time we have on Political Paradigm today. Thank you very much for watching as well. If you'd like to catch this episode and others, simply go to YouTube and search Political Paradigm or go to channelstv.com. I'm Terry Ikumi. Goodbye.